54, real estate investor Ed Oken appears to be having a classic midlife crisis. He's burning through cash and declaring his love at first sight for a woman half his age.
And I can't believe she married me.
But the money Oken spends is not his. It belongs to people who just wanted to keep it safe.
It never occurred to me that the money could be taken out of an escrow account.
But Ed Oken, deeply in love, just can't stop.
He bought 3 jets, a helicopter, a salon, luxury condos, luxury homes. There was no end to his greed.
It is said that the difference between a man and a boy is the price of his toys. Before Ed Oken had a Lamborghini and a Ferrari. Before he had 3 private jets. Before he had a 130-foot yacht. He was a chubby kid in Toronto. As the little boy called Eddie grows up, he does not grow tall. His adult height is 5'5". His stepbrother, Norman Griesdorf, thinks that explains a lot.
He was short, had a complex, had to prove that he was as big as his father or his family, and that he could do things. Not really interested in doing a lot of work, but interested in showing that he had success.
At the age of 21, Oken meets Carol May. They fall in love, and in a few years, they marry.
I met Eddie when I was 19 years old. He seemed like the kind of person that was going to go far in life.
The newlyweds stay in Toronto, where Oken tries his hand first as a music producer and then as a real estate investor. He even wants to make life easier for his in-laws.
He encouraged my father to perhaps take some of his retirement money and send it up to him. My father liked Eddie very much, and so he trusted him, and he sent up money, quite a bit of money at that time.
There is nothing to worry about. Young Eddie's investments seem to be doing well for him.
Probably just in the few years we were together, he bought 7 or 8 different cars. We had an Aston Martin, and we had a Mercedes, and we had a BMW, which is, you know, it's a bit much for a 22-year-old. It really was a bit much.
And there is more. They also have a yacht, the Endless Summer.
We even had a captain. The captain would stay on it all the time and take care of it and take it down to Florida with Eddie. I think it was his first taste of big living, and definitely liked it.
But the good times do not last long.
What happened was through, I guess, the last, maybe the 3rd or 4th year of our marriage, his personality really seemed to change, and he became angry, and he was always screaming at everyone, and including me and the dog, and it made me very uncomfortable. So I wanted to get out of the marriage.
Preparing to divorce Oken, Carol discovers that he is behind in payments on personal and business loans totaling $1.5 million. And she, as a co-signer, is expected to pay up.
The debt was overwhelming for anyone, but particularly someone who's 22 years old. I'd never worked. I didn't even have a job.
Carol settles with the banks, but things do not work out as well for her parents. They discover Ed did not invest their money. He spent it.
So that money was gone, and my father pressed charges. He pressed criminal charges. But he then withdrew those criminal charges because Eddie started...
And nobody was really anxious to find him.
And 32 years later, in 2005, at the age of 54, he is on wife number 2 and owns a company called Investment Properties of America, which buys, sells, and manages shopping malls and industrial buildings.
How he portrayed himself was a successful real estate entrepreneur who could locate undervalued real estate, shopping malls, things like that, and then basically flip them and sell them for large profits.
Oken still likes big boats. In February, he attends a boat show in Fort Lauderdale, where he meets Simone Bolani.
Simone Bolani was from Brazil. She was a very attractive young woman in her mid-20s when she met Ed Oken. I believe she was one of the young ladies who was showing yachts to prospective buyers.
Oken tells friends he falls in love with Simone immediately, and soon he files for divorce from his second wife. He is robbing the cradle, and that's not all. Next on American Greed.
I'm the groom. And I love my wife.
Witness an over-the-top wedding, and you'll never guess who pays for it. At the start of 2005, Ed Oken seems at the top of his game. He is setting up a new life in Miami. He has a new girlfriend, Simone Bolani. And he has a new business, Investment Properties of America, known as IP of A, that owns and operates shopping malls and warehouses from Indiana to Louisiana. Its headquarters are in Richmond, Virginia, in a small office park 12 miles from downtown. There is just one continual problem for Oken. His company is not making money. He cannot pay his bills.
By 2005, his commercial real estate holdings were losing money at a rapid pace. There was actually documentary evidence that one of his largest properties was so cash-strapped that they didn't have enough money for gas for the security vehicles in the mall.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Dry is part of a federal task force that investigates Oken. It includes agents from the Postal Inspection Service, the IRS, and the FBI.
In about 2005, his company was in a severe cash crisis, and he was going through a messy divorce. And at that time, he's ordered to pay $8 million to the wife through the divorce.
Mr. Oken was going to be fined $25,000 a day if the divorce settlement wasn't finalized. He was under enormous pressure to settle the divorce proceedings.
He also needs cash to shower Simone Bolani with anything and everything.
The jewelry, the clothing, the shopping. I mean, what we heard was that Ms. Bolani got whatever she wanted from Mr. Oken.
And that summer, as cash-strapped Oken searches for money, he finds it in Boston in a business called the Atlantic Exchange Company, known as AEC. It's a type of business called a qualified intermediary, known as a QI. The sole function of a QI is to hold money for real estate investors who want to defer paying capital gains taxes. According to the U.S. Tax Code, Section 1031, people who sell an investment property can defer taxes on their profits if they reinvest the money in 180 days and never touch the money. They must give their money temporarily to a qualified intermediary.
So if you're a client and you give your money to a qualified intermediary, you're not investing with a qualified intermediary. You're basically just saying, I'm giving you my money, hold my money. Within 180 days, I'm going to ask for that money back so I can buy a new property.
In the summer of 2005, Ed Oken looks at QI businesses and sees the answer to his problems.
Oh, these are gigantic piggy banks that just hold large amount of money, waiting for transactions.
At the time, AEC is holding roughly $170 million in what are called client exchange funds. And in August, Oken gets a loan, buys the Atlantic Exchange Company for $4 million, and immediately gets access to the nearly $170 million in customer money. Helping him with the transaction is a former paralegal, now his chief operating officer, Laura Coleman.
Were you his assistant?
Yes.
Were
Had a
you?
glorified title. But yes, anything he asked is done.
We're gonna take a break
Coleman
here.
did not respond to American Greed's request for an interview, but in a video deposition for use in a civil lawsuit, she explains how she helps Oken get the cash he needs from AEC.
Ed asked that all the money be moved to Richmond. I opened bank accounts at Bank of America. The money was transferred, and I would send out wires or issue checks, depending on what the transaction involved.
It's just that easy. Because as Brian Lefevre, a special agent with IRS Criminal Investigation, knows, no one regulates qualified intermediaries.
Qualified intermediary is not necessarily regulated like a bank. There are exchange agreements which govern what you're supposed to do with the money. However, you don't necessarily have someone looking over your shoulder to make sure you're abiding by the exchange agreements.
And so Oken and Coleman can take funds that were supposed to be in escrow and use them to pay Ed Oken's bills and to fund his fantasy life.
The day after he purchased the company, he writes a check to his ex-wife for $8 million.
He then took money from the depositors that was in AEC and used it to pay back the loan that he had taken to purchase AEC.
And just 8 days after he buys AEC, he takes $4.1 million and uses it to close on this house on Miami's prestigious Hibiscus Island. Finally, the piece de resistance. In November, he puts $8.6 million of AEC's client money toward the purchase of a 130-foot yacht.
He kept a full crew, 2 stewardesses and a captain on full staff. It was beautifully furnished and was very exquisite on the inside.
He names the yacht after his bride-to-be, Simone. They are married in December.
I'm the groom. And I love my wife. And I can't believe she married me, but she did.
The wedding, like almost everything these days, is paid out of the AEC account, more than $200,000. No expense is spared for Simone. In months to come, Oken will buy her clothes, jewelry, even her own hair salon, reportedly, so she doesn't have to wait for an appointment. And she is giving him what he calls the best dream of his life.
We're expecting a baby. Wow. When we found out last Wednesday, it's a little boy. And that should make our yacht broker, Paul Moran, very happy because there's a sequel coming, so he's going to buy a boat.
It's as if the money will never run out. And for a while in Richmond, all is going well. Although Oken is taking money out of AEC, the well-established business continues to draw customers, and their new deposits cover the closings of people who put their money in months earlier.
Now, have you ever heard any term used to describe a situation where you take new funds and use it to pay prior transactions?
Yes, ma'am. It's
What
a Ponzi
term?
scheme.
I'm sorry?
A Ponzi scheme.
And was there a Ponzi scheme going on in the QIs owned by Oken?
Yes, ma'am.
By the end of 2005, Oken has taken an estimated $55 million in client exchange funds. And at that time, Oken finds himself in that inevitable spot where every Ponzi scheme leads.
What had happened by then is he had depleted the client exchange funds so much out of AEC that the new client exchange funds couldn't keep up with all the obligations from the prior clients.
It's time for Ed Oken to find new cash flow. Next on American Greed, the outrageous demands of working for Ed Oken.
People couldn't get their work done because they were off buying diapers and cigarettes and baby formula and FedExing it to New Hampshire because he didn't want to go to a grocery store.
Outside Washington, D.C., in Silver Spring, Maryland, video editor Bonnie Schluss is trying to build a retirement fund. The bulk of the money in her nest egg came from her sister, Linda, who died of leukemia at the age of 42.
I really would have preferred to have my sister, but she was gone. She had worked at an ad agency, become a partner, and had some money that she left. And in some ways, this was her taking care of me.
At first, Schluss used the money Linda left to buy a rental property nearby her home. She is now looking to diversify and wants to sell the building. She estimates that her capital gains tax will be $50,000.
And that was a lot of money for me. So I decided I would try and pay part of the taxes and defer the rest by buying another investment property. And there were regulations to it. You had to give it to what they called a qualified intermediary, which seemed fine to me. The government's telling me to do this.
Schluss looks online for a qualified intermediary and finds one nearby. It's called Security 1031 Services, headquartered in Connecticut, known as SOS. What she does not know is that Ed Oken has purchased SOS from its owner, a lawyer named Todd Pajonas.
Oken came in, bought the company, and soon after that made Todd Pajonas the CEO of 1031 Tax Group, which was a company created, a kind of umbrella that would hold all the qualified intermediaries that Oken was purchasing.
When Pajonas goes to work for Oken, Oken tells him that he has borrowed money from AEC to invest in real estate, and he has a standard answer for how he will pay it back.
I'm selling them all. I've got a great deal in the works. I'm going to make $100 million on this. Everybody's going to be whole. That's what he kept saying over and over again.
But the malls he says he will sell are mortgaged to the max. IP of A properties are losing as much as $900,000 a month. So Oken uses QI funds to cover the loss and to buy more toys.
You know, you name it. Mr. Oken bought almost any sports car you can imagine.
He bought 3 jets, luxury condos, luxury homes.
And the QI accounts get frighteningly low. In March, Pajonas writes to Oken that our reserves are below 10 million, a dangerous level. If we don't get some money, we will be staring into an empty vault.
Pajonas understood that if you miss one exchange, if one client is at a closing table and doesn't get their money, that basically no other clients in the future are ever going to give you their money.
And so he keeps the emails coming. In April, he writes, "We are one wire transfer away from oblivion." Oken's response? He buys a $10 million house on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. He buys Simone a $36,000 diamond necklace and an $86,000 diamond ring. And in July, he sends an email to Laura Coleman showing her our new toy, Check It. Only $800,000. It's a helicopter.
Did you ever observe when you were working with Mr. Oken, him being wasteful with the money?
Yes, everything was wasteful. I mean, everything from the loans he obtained to overpaying for real estate to, I mean, we had opportunities in my Richmond office where people couldn't get their work done because they were off buying diapers and cigarettes and baby formula and FedExing it to New Hampshire because he didn't want to go to a grocery store.
But for Oken, there are no worries because there is no need for the money to ever run out.
It was a never-ending pool of money as long as when the money got short, Mr. Oken could find another qualified intermediary to buy.
And that is just what he does. This summer, he purchases 3 more.
Generally, he paid for all of the QIs except for one with other client exchange funds. He never really brought his own money to the table.
And then in August, an accountant discovers that Oken purchased 2 Florida condominiums with AEC funds. He tells Todd Pajonas.
And this is when Pajonas has a eureka moment. Oh my God, this isn't just Ed investing this in commercial real estate. Mr. Oken is using this for his own luxury lifestyle.
And so at this point, Papa Jonas is sounding the alarm. He's jumping up and down.
There was a part in the trial where I asked Pajonas, were you worried about this? And he leaned forward and he said, I was scared every day I woke up.
Finally, in September, Pajonas calls for a meeting on the Simone. He is determined to force Oken to sign promissory notes that will guarantee that he will pay back the money.
Todd was livid. I mean, he was almost violent. I actually thought that there would be a physical altercation on the boat. And they were screaming and yelling and cussing at each other. And Todd said he'd kill him. He had to sign it right now.
And was Mr. Oken reluctant to sign this document?
He didn't want to sign it. He didn't want to sign any of it.
And he did in fact sign it?
He did.
Okay.
And Oken does pay back a small percentage to the qualified intermediaries. But a few months after the meeting on the yacht, an internal accounting shows that a staggering $118 million is missing from the QIs. Pajonas writes to Lara Coleman, Ed may have millions of dollars at stake, but we have our lives, reputations, family, and freedom at stake. This man will be the ruin of us all. Next on American Greed, Oken's own lawyers let him know he is probably breaking the law.
He went apoplectic initially, and his initial response was, need to fire these folks.
In the fall of 2006, in Richmond, at the offices of Investment Properties of America, Eric Perkins is a fairly new in-house attorney. Things are going well for him until October, when he learns disturbing news that his boss, Ed Oken, is borrowing money from escrow accounts. He asks his supervisor, Chief Operating Officer Lara Coleman, about it.
And her response was, there aren't any loans. And she said there may have been a couple in the past, but those have been paid off.
It is, of course, a lie. Oken has taken millions of QI dollars that he has never paid back. And then Coleman tells Perkins another lie.
On top of that, the whole practice of that had been vetted and approved by a number of outside firms.
Oken kept going from day one. Don't worry, I have a legal opinion. I have a legal opinion that says I can do this.
Perkins looks into it and finds that Oken has received all kinds of legal advice on this. Even starting in 2005, when he bought AEC, the language is straightforward. AEC should not be in the business of lending money.
It became clear at some point in that time frame that I'd been lied to.
As he continues his research, Perkins learns that the IRS does not regulate qualified intermediaries. What protects the customers is the contract they sign, called an exchange agreement.
Most of the time, those exchange agreements provide that the funds need to be held either in a financial institution, in an escrow account, or a segregated account.
It's obvious to Eric Perkins. Ed Oken is violating his customers' contracts.
We weren't talking about a situation where someone is driving 68 miles per hour in a 65 zone. The companies were going 120 in a school zone.
In November, Perkins and other in-house advisors write a memo to Ed Oken and Lara Coleman, making their views loud and clear that Ed Oken could face criminal prosecution.
Basically, the memo says, you got to stop. You got to pay all the money back. It was a very forceful memo, putting everybody on notice. These are my conclusions.
Ed Oken is outraged.
He went apoplectic initially, and his initial response upon receiving it was, need to fire these folks.
He sends an email. This guy will not run my business. I want him terminated tomorrow. And he looks to a Richmond law firm for another opinion. He soon gets the answer. The firm writes that his conduct could result in civil and criminal liability. He is told to pay back the money, and they add, we will cease to render any professional services. Meanwhile, Perkins makes the decision to submit his letter of resignation to Oken.
What he did was as senseless as it was callous, as it was stupid. I mean, you just can't find a rhyme or a reason for why he did this.
And as Perkins walks out the door, Todd Pajonas is not far behind. In November, a closing comes due and money is short. Pajonas starts screaming again.
It's unclear completely whether it was a mutual firing and quitting, but that was Pajonas' last day in the office. Oken had the locks changed, ordered everybody not to let Pajonas back on site.
Weeks before, Pajonas negotiated a severance package for close to $1 million with Oken. It contains a confidentiality agreement. After months of working to stop Oken from raiding the QI accounts, Pajonas knows there is nothing more he can do. And Ed Oken sets his sights on another qualified intermediary.
Even though he's told to pay the money back and he's told that this is criminal, Ed goes out and buys another qualified intermediary. He needs a new piggy bank.
Coming up, Oken attempts to woo his victims with a stunning claim to fame.
And he said that when Sly and the Family Stone were playing at Woodstock, Ed was the drummer there. And you're just going, wow, this guy's amazing.
But you wouldn't like him when he's angry. Of all the stories about Ed Oken's greed, the one that for many tops them all takes place in January 2007 when he hosts a dinner party for 6 at a restaurant in the Bahamas. He owes close to $120 million to his own customers' accounts, and he can't make his own payroll. But he serves cognac that costs more than $1,000 a shot. The bill for the dinner comes to $56,000. Some call his behavior reckless. Michael Dry disagrees.
Reckless would be the understatement of the year to describe Ed Oken. It wasn't reckless. It was a total disregard for what he was doing with other people's money and the destruction in people's lives that his behavior was risking on a daily basis.
People like Candace Graham in Portola Valley, California. She has just sold the building where she ran a business with her ex-husband. She wants to take the $3.1 million she made on the sale and invest it in multiple properties.
And I was in my 50s, and I was beginning to think of, how will I retire? And it just was not safe to have everything in one place.
She puts the money into a QI called 1031 Advance, located in San Jose, California. It is owned by a woman named Janet DeShiel, who has just met Ed Oken.
He's like, oh, you're a QI, I buy QIs. And I kind of laughed, and he's an odd little man, and he's just kind of frenetic.
DeShiel's QI is holding approximately $30 million, and Ed Oken, low on cash, wants access to that money.
And why did Oken buy 1031 Advance? It was supposed to be a short-term fix to the liquidity problem because he was going to blow exchanges. He wasn't going to be able to pay old exchangers.
And so Oken invites DeShiel and her partner to a meeting on the Simone.
The gentleman who met us was the captain. His name was Captain Jack, and he gave us the full tour. At one point, he stopped us and says, see this picture? And it was a picture of Sly and the Family Stone. And he said that Ed was a drummer. And when Sly and the Family Stone were playing at Woodstock, Ed was the drummer there. And you're just going, wow, this guy's amazing.
Oken arrives on board and offers to pay DeShiel whatever she wants for her business, and also offers her the job of running all of his QIs. She accepts.
He mentioned to her that a small percentage of client exchange funds were invested in commercial real estate, but he assured her that it was a very small percentage and that the client exchange agreements allowed for it.
And he said he'd gotten legal opinions, that his attorneys had blessed it, that there are no problems with it.
At first, Oken borrows $2 million, then another $8 million for investments. And then one day, his accountant slips up and tells DeShiel that money is actually needed to cover payroll at his real estate companies.
When I found out the $700,000 had been used to pay bills and it wasn't in an investment or in any way secured, I knew everything was wrong. And I knew clearly that they'd been lying to me.
As DeShiel considers what to do, she comes up with a plan to force Oken to pay the money back. She opens a secret bank account and begins to send new customers deposits there.
Why I did that is I wanted to stop putting money in their alleged cookie jar. I sincerely believed that Ed Oken had that money. He had properties. He had all these exotic cars. I'd seen them. And I thought, okay, I stop the flow, they'll start putting the money back because they have to in order for the exchanges to keep going forward.
But then she learns Oken is negotiating to buy two items. One is another Gulfstream jet, and the other is one more qualified intermediary.
And that QI company held between $900 million and $1 billion. And she realized if he gets his hands on this, she knew what was going to happen.
And so in April, just 4 months after she began working for him, Janet DeShiel goes to Washington, D.C. and blows the whistle on Ed Oken.
I was escorted by 3 attorneys into a windowless room in the federal building and poured out my story to them.
The feds ask her to return to Oken's Richmond office wearing a hidden video camera.
The federal agents wired me up, and then I took a cab in, then walked through the offices to give them like a visual map of where everything was. So I'd pop my head in and say, "Hi, Kathy, hi, such and such. What are you doing in here?"
And a short time later, Janet DeShiel resigns, and Oken's offices in Richmond receive some unexpected visitors.
I don't even know how many federal agents showed up at the offices, guns drawn, bulletproof vests, and herded everybody into a conference room.
At that time, across the country, hundreds of Oken's unsuspecting customers like Bonnie Schluss believe their money is safe. Schluss has $335,000 in one of Oken's QIs and is making plans to buy a condo hotel in Hollywood, Florida.
That is the view looking out from my room.
And she is not the least bit worried about her money.
The 1031 agreement says right at the beginning, Section 2, exchange account. SOS 1031 agrees to establish an exchange escrow account. And it never occurred to me that the money could be taken out of an escrow account.
Next on American Greed, a desperate victim calls Oken, demanding her money.
I got a phone recording that was a music recording that said, "I'm too sexy for my shirt," basically over and over again. And then I really knew I was dealing with a complete disaster.
In April 2007, as federal agents are raiding Ed Oken's office, Candace Graham in California is ready to move forward buying an investment property. She has $3.1 million with Janet DeShiel's qualified intermediary, and she calls DeShiel's office to let her know that she will need her money.
She was not in the office. And the office staff hemmed and hawed. And finally, after much questioning, I found out she was no longer with the company.
Graham learns that DeShiel has sold her company to Ed Oken.
When I tried to call Ed Oken, I got a phone recording that was very, very strange. And it was a music recording that said, "I'm too sexy for my shirt," basically, over and over again. And then I really knew I was dealing with a complete disaster.
In time, she learns that Oken is under federal investigation, and the money that she thought was safely in escrow is gone.
I absolutely panicked. This is everything I had worked for my entire life. And I didn't know what to do. It just was devastating.
At that time, outside Washington, D.C., Bonnie Schluss gets the same news.
And I said, wait a minute, how could this possibly happen? I did what the government told me to do. I put it in an escrow account that had a bond on it.
She is not alone. As many as 250 people think their money is safely on deposit in Oken's qualified intermediaries when the plug is finally pulled on his game.
Many of the victims lost their life savings. I mean, they counted on these investment properties as income so that they could retire, so that they could pay bills, so that they could send their kids to college. I mean, these were horribly sad stories.
For months, in his bunker on Hibiscus Island, Oken is still hoping to avoid prosecution. And he keeps up the story. He can get a loan. He will pay everything back. And even today, in a telephone interview with American Greed, he makes this same claim.
I was recapitalizing all of my real estate with a $250 million loan to pay off whatever I owed the QIs, shut them down, and be able to go acquire more real estate.
But Oken has no ability to get a loan. Later, the findings of a bankruptcy trustee discover that even the yacht has an $8 million loan against it. Ed Oken is out of money. And that explains his next step, which was reported to the feds in March of 2008.
The team received a phone call from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office indicating that Mr. Oken and Simone had just traveled to Palm Beach County from Miami to pawn approximately $1 million worth of jewelry, and they received about $200,000 back from that pawn. And we became very concerned that Mr. Oken had become desperate and was preparing to flee.
Immediately, the investigators prepare a 27-count indictment charging Oken with conspiracy to commit mail-and-wire fraud and money laundering. He is arrested at his house on Hibiscus Island a few days later and is adamant that he has done nothing wrong.
Mr. Oken now portrays himself as a victim of a rogue system, a rogue prosecutor, rogue postal inspectors, folks who didn't follow the rules, and he just keeps blaming everyone but himself.
Oken maintains that recent court decisions support his case.
I was advised I could do this, and I can't, as the law now proves. The qualified intermediary owns the property and owns the funds outright. Because we own them, we are allowed to use and invest the funds in any manner we see fit without any restriction.
And he points out he never missed a closing until the feds ruined everything.
As long as you could meet your closing demands, there's nothing restricted or regulated about this business, and you can basically invest it in whatever you want.
For Oken, that's a defense. For his victims, it's an outrage.
There's no excuse for this. This is an industry that the government created. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's no regulations on it, and I've been the victim of it. The qualified intermediary is not a qualified intermediary. It's just somebody who is not a disqualified intermediary.
Since 2008, settlements from bankruptcy and class action lawsuits against Oken's banks and insurance companies have brought in almost 70% of the money he took. And now Oken's victims are working on behalf of future victims. Bonnie Schluss is constantly trying to meet with members of Congress to ask for stronger regulation.
My goal is so it doesn't happen to anybody else. You know, there's no excuse for it. There are simple changes that could be made in the law to make it safer.
Back in Richmond, Lara Coleman pleads guilty to conspiring to commit wire and mail fraud. She is sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Ed Oken believes he is innocent and stands trial in March 2009. Bonnie Schluss is there every day.
He was never sorry. He never once said he was sorry. Even at the trial, he was given a chance to say anything. He said nothing. He watched all of us. And no emotion, no nothing.
Oken is convicted on all counts. At his sentencing hearing, there is a surprise witness, his first wife.
I went to the sentencing because they might think that this was new behavior. And of course, I knew that it really was part of his personality. And this is who he was. And he had been like this a long time.
After hearing from Oken's victims directly, the judge hands down a sentence that will mean life in prison for Ed Oken. In August, he is sentenced to 100 years.
A lot of people I've heard say, well, murderers don't get that. Why does that happen? But the problem is they don't understand. You've got hundreds of people that have had their dreams stolen by this man. And he doesn't have the decency to apologize or to empathize or to say, I'm sorry that happened to you. So 100 years was the correct sentence for him. The judge got that one right.
Hey there. Welcome to Midnight Sleep. Crime. I'm here to help you relax. Tonight, I know many of you use this video to fall asleep. So, before you get cozy, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. When the residents of Pine Hollow began reporting phone calls coming from their own disconnected landlines, each carrying the faint echo of their own voice, the local sheriff thought it was just a glitch. But after 3 people vanished from the same street in the same week, it became clear that something or someone was using the lines to lure them home. In the quiet little town of Pine Hollow, where the fog moved slower than the people and the rusted street lights flickered like dying memories, nothing much ever happened. At least that's what the locals like to tell themselves. The population sat under 3,000, most of whom had been born, raised, and buried within the same 10 miles radius. Nights were calm, broken only by the occasional barking dog or the low hum of the freight train that cut through town at midnight. But on the night of October 3rd, 2017, something happened that would shake Pine Hollow's sense of peace forever. It started with a phone call. 9:47 p.m. M. 218, Maple Drive. Sarah Kessler sat curled up on her faded floral couch, one leg tucked under the other, flipping through TV channels she didn't really care about. Her husband, David, was away on a week-long construction job in Ohio. The kids were asleep upstairs, and the house felt unusually still. She reached for the remote to turn off the television when her landline phone began to ring. That alone made her jump. Nobody called the landline anymore. It hadn't been in real use since they'd all switched to Cell phones. The phone rang again. Out of habit or maybe curiosity, Sarah picked it up. Hello. There was a crackle on the line, followed by a deep hollow echo. Then a voice. Sarah. Her heart jumped. The voice sounded familiar. It was her own. She froze, unsure if she was hearing things. Who is this? She asked, her tone sharp. The line hissed. Then her own voice, exactly her voice, spoke again, but slower this time. Don't go downstairs. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the receiver for several seconds before setting it back down. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She could hear the faint creak of the house settling, the clock ticking, and her own breathing. A cold wave of disbelief rolled through her. It was just a glitch, she told herself. Maybe a prank, a recording. But who could mimic her voice so perfectly? Before she could decide what to do, a noise came from below. Something that sounded like the basement. Door creaking open. Sarah turned toward the hallway. The basement door was supposed to be locked. She stood up, slowly, clutching her phone as if it could protect her. The air seemed heavier, like it was pressing against her skin. The floorboards groaned as she moved closer to the hall. Then another sound. A whisper. It was faint, but she could swear it came from the basement. Sarah. Her stomach dropped. She flicked on the hall light and stared at the basement door. It was slightly ajar, the edge of darkness yawning at her from below. Is someone there? She called out, her voice trembling. No answer. She waited, but only silence filled the space. Finally, gathering her courage, she grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and stepped toward the door. She flicked the beam downward. The light barely pierced the thick blackness. The air coming up from below was cold, damp, and oddly still. Then, she noticed something strange. The phone on the wall near the basement steps was off the hook. The cord hung loose, swaying slightly as if it had just been picked up. Her heart pounded. The basement phone line had been disconnected months ago. David had cut it himself. Sarah stepped back, clutching the flashlight so hard her knuckles turned white, and that's when she saw it. At the bottom of the stairs, illuminated just faintly by the flashlight's glow, stood a figure. Not moving, not breathing, just there. It looked like her. Sarah gasped and stumbled backward, slamming the basement door shut. She locked it, dropped the flashlight, and ran upstairs to her children's room, her mind spinning. She didn't sleep that night. She barely breathed. The next morning, when the police came, the basement was empty, but the phone on the wall was back on its hook. Sheriff Mark Harlan didn't know what to make of the report. He'd been Pine Hollow sheriff for 14 years, and the most serious crimes he'd seen were bar fights and deer poaching. He listened to Sarah's story carefully, jotting notes into his small leather pad. So, you're saying the phone called you from your own number? He asked, trying to sound neutral. Yes, Sarah said, her eyes still puffy from a sleepless night. It was my voice. I'm not crazy, Sheriff. I know how it sounds, but I swear. Heron raised a hand. I believe you think you heard what you heard. I just want to make sure. There's no logical explanation first. He checked the basement, shining his flashlight around. The space was neat, dusty, and utterly ordinary. Boxes of old toys, a washer and dryer, a chest. Freezer humming quietly in the corner. Could be the line got crossed somehow. Harlan muttered. Landlines can do that. Ghost calls. Ghost calls? Sarah asked, hugging herself. Just a term happens when a phone system loops. back or picks up a recorded echo from another line. Nothing supernatural. But as he said it, something about the basement made him uneasy. The air felt colder than it should have been, and for a split second, when his flashlight swept across the far wall, he thought he saw a faint smear of something grayish and wet before the beam moved on. He shook it off. Just condensation, maybe. Still, he took a photo. That same night, another call came, but this time it wasn't Sarah who got it. It was her neighbor, Evelyn Moore, who lived 2 houses down. Evelyn was 72, a retired librarian known for her sharp memory and sharper opinions. At 10:12 p.m. her Landline rang. When she answered, she heard heavy static and then a voice whispering her name. Evelyn, she frowned. Who's this? No reply. Then came the same hollow echo and a faint sob. He's in the house, the voice said. Evelyn froze. What did you just say? He's in the house. The lion went dead. Her cat hissed and darted under the table. Evelyn grabbed her cane and made her way to the hallway. At first, everything seemed normal, but then she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her front door, one she had locked every night for 20 years, was standing wide open. By the time deputies arrived, Evelyn Moore was gone. Her phone lay on the floor, its cord torn from the wall. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no broken glass, just the open door and a strange set of fingerprints found on the receiver. Prints that didn't match Evelyn or anyone in the local database. And strangest of all, the call log showed the incoming call had come from Evelyn's own number. Sheriff Harlan sat in his office the next morning, the events spinning in his head. First, Sarah, now Evelyn. Both incidents on the same street. Both phone calls traced back to the same origin, the receiver itself. He poured himself a cup of coffee, stared at the file, and muttered under his breath, "What the hell is going on in Maple Drive?" As he flipped through Sarah's statement again, something caught his attention. She had mentioned the time her phone rang. 9:47 p.m. Evelyn's had rung at 10:12 p.m., exactly 25 minutes apart. He checked the date. Both calls had occurred October 3rd. Then a deputy burst through the door, pale as a ghost. "Sheriff, you're going to want to hear this," he said, holding up a phone log report. "We traced the phone activity for Maple Drive overnight. There were 3 landlines active after midnight." Harlan frowned. 3. Yes, sir. Sarah Kessler's, Evelyn Moore's, and the house in between them, the Haskins place. The deputy nodded. "Yeah, but that's the thing. Sheriff, the Haskins house doesn't have service. Hasn't for years." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Then what? Number was active?" The deputy slid the report across the desk. Harlan leaned in. The number listed was the same as Sarah Kessler's. Only this time, the timestamp showed 11:59 p.m., 2 hours after she'd unplugged the phone entirely. That night, Sarah stayed with her sister in town. Her house was sealed off as part of the ongoing investigation. The sheriff requested the telecom company to run a deeper trace, but the engineers couldn't explain it. There were no loopbacks, no duplicate lines, no technical calls that could make a disconnected landline call itself. And yet, the calls kept coming, not just to Sarah. By the end of that week, 5 residents of Maple Drive had reported hearing their own voice on the phone. 2 of them, Evelyn Moore and a teenager named Ryan Ellison, had disappeared completely. Both homes showed the same signature, no forced entry, no signs of struggle, phones ripped from the wall, And every time the same pattern. The last call came from their own number. Sheriff Harlan drove out to Maple Drive again on October 9th. The street was quiet, lined with tall pines that blocked most of the morning light. A thin mist hung in the air. He parked in front of the Haskins' abandoned house. The property had been empty since 2011, but the electricity was still running for reasons nobody could explain. He walked up to the porch, his boots creaking against the warped wood. The air smelled of damp soil and something faintly metallic. Inside, the house was stripped bare. No furniture. No personal belongings, just a rotary phone mounted to the wall near the kitchen, covered in dust. Harlan stared at it. Then, to his disbelief, it began to ring. One slow, drawn-out tone after another, echoing through the empty house. He froze. After the third ring, he lifted the receiver.
"Heron," he said, carefully.
For a moment there was nothing, just static. Then a voice came through, soft, trembling, and painfully
"Familiar."
Sheriff, he recognized it immediately. It was Evelyn Moore. Evelyn. Evelyn, where are you? Her voice crackled through, distorted and distant.
"He's not done yet."
Who isn't? But before she could answer, the line filled with the faint sound of breathing. Then, something else, the sound of another phone ringing right behind him.
Harlan
spun around. Across the room, the second landline, the one on the opposite wall,
was ringing now, too.
He stared at both phones, his gut twisting. Then, faintly, from the receiver, still pressed to his ear, came another voice. Not Evelyn's, not his own. A man's voice called, whispering. She shouldn't have answered. The lion went dead.
The
following morning, Sheriff Mark Harland stood in the cold gray dawn outside the Haskins' house, staring at the rotary phone through the cracked window.
The
cord still hung from the receiver, swaying gently like a pendulum.
He
hadn't told anyone what he'd heard.
Not yet.
The deputies were starting to whisper. One claimed the phones were
rigged.
Another said it was all feedback from an old line, but Harlan had been
there.
He'd heard Evelyn's voice, a woman who, by every official record, had been missing for nearly a week.
The
sound of that whisper still crawled down his spine. She shouldn't have answered. By 800 a.m., the property was sealed off again, and Harlan was back at the station reviewing reports. A stack of witness statements sat on his desk, most of them describing the same eerie
pattern.
Calls from their own number, whispers of familiar voices, and always a warning. He rubbed his temple. There's no way this many technical errors happen on the same street, he muttered. Deputy Rosa Vance, his most level-headed officer, leaned against the doorframe. "We got the phone company's audit back," she said. "You might want to
see this."
She handed him a printed log. 3 columns of data, numbers, and timestamps filled the page. "These are outbound signals from Maple Drive," she explained. "Except the lines they're coming from aren't active. Look at these." Harlan squinted. 3 numbers were listed again and again, each marked inactive. "Sarah Kessler's address," Rosa said, tapping one entry. "Evelyn Moore's. And the Haskins place. But those lines are dead." "That's the thing," she said quietly. "They shouldn't be transmitting anything." But at exactly 11:59 every night for the past 7 days, they light up for 37 seconds. Every night,
Rosa nodded.
Like clockwork. Later that afternoon, Harlan met with a regional telecom technician, Tom Ruiz, at the Kessler residence. Tom was in his late 30s, carrying a tangle of meters, coils, and Diagnostic gear. I've seen loopbacks. Before, Tom said, crouching by the junction box outside the house. But this is weird. The lines are grounded.
Properly.
No moisture damage, no shorting. They're clean, but the signal strength spikes every night from inside the houses, like something's activating. Could it be an old alarm system? Tom shook his head. If it were, we'd see the routing trace. I don't know, Sheriff. It's like the line's calling itself. Heron frowned. That even possible? Tom gave a thin smile. Only if someone's in there manually bridging the wires, but that would leave marks.
And
trust me, these boxes haven't been open in years. As he spoke, a faint click sounded from the wall phone inside the house. Both men turned. The receiver was off the hook again. Tom slowly walked over, his boots crunching over old tiles. Did you? I didn't touch it, Harlan said. Tom picked up the handset, holding it to his ear. His expression changed immediately. What is
it?
Harlan asked. Tom swallowed.
It's
ringing from the other end. He held the receiver out. Heron listened. He could hear it. Another phone ringing in. Response distant but clear, like it was echoing from deep underground.
Tom
lowered his voice. There's no return signal on the meter. That ringing
shouldn't exist.
The sheriff's skin prickled. Then the ringing stopped.
That
evening, as the sun bled behind the pines, Sarah Kessler returned briefly to her house under police supervision to collect clothes for her children.
She
refused to go in alone. I just want to grab their blankets, she said softly, clutching her jacket. The ones from their room. Then, I'm leaving again. Duty Rosa accompanied her inside. The air was stale and faintly metallic.
The
clock in the hallway had stopped at 9:47, the same time Sarah's first call had come through. They went upstairs.
Quickly.
The children's room was untouched, stuffed animals still lined neatly along the windowsill, beds made, curtains drawn. But as Sarah reached for her daughter's blanket, something caught her eye. The baby monitor, a small old device they hadn't used in months, was glowing. It wasn't plugged in.
Rosa frowned.
You sure that's off? It doesn't even have batteries anymore, Sarah whispered. Then, from the monitor speaker, came a faint rhythmic crackling and, underneath it, a whisper. Her name said, exactly in her own voice. Sarah's eyes went wide. She dropped the blanket, backing toward the wall. It's happening.
Again, she breathed.
Rosa snatched the device, pulling the back open, empty.
No.
Power source. The glow dimmed and went out, leaving the room in silence. Let's go, the deputy said firmly. Now at the station, Rosa reported everything. Harlan listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. We can't keep pretending this is technical interference, she said. Something's happening on Maple Drive, and if it's not electrical, it's don't say supernatural. Harlan interrupted, his tone hard. She hesitated. Then what do you call a powerless monitor speaking in her own voice? Harlan stood pacing.
I
don't know yet, but until I do, we treat like a case. We collect evidence.
We
track times. We map the connections.
He
turned toward the wall map, where the houses were marked with red pins. Kessler, Moore, Haskins, Ellison, all within 200 Y.
He circled them with a
marker. Whatever's happening, it's local. Rosa crossed her arms. Localized.
How?
Harlan tapped the space between the
pins.
Power grid, old junction, maybe a substation loop.
But notice something.
Every one of these houses connects through the same underground trunk line. You think it's in the cables? I think something's using them. That night he decided to see for himself. At 11:50 p.m., Harlan parked at the dead end of Maple Drive. Engine off, lights dimmed. The air was damp, fog rolling low across the pavement. Crickets chirped faintly, and somewhere a dog barked once, then
stopped.
He checked his watch. 11:58. He waited. The world felt unnaturally quiet, as if the entire street were holding its breath. Then, at 11:59, it happened. From inside the abandoned Haskins house came the sharp mechanical trill of a phone. He stepped out of the car, flashlight ready. The sound echoed strangely, each ring overlapping itself, as though bouncing from multiple directions. He crossed the lawn, the grass wet beneath his boots. The phone rang again, louder now, though the house had no power. When he reached the porch, the door opened on its own. He hesitated, only a second, then stepped inside. The air was freezing. His breath fogged in. Front of him, the rotary phone on the wall was vibrating slightly, its cord taut. He lifted the receiver. "This is Sheriff Heron," he said into the silence. No answer, just static. Then, the faint echo of his own voice came back through the line. "This is Sheriff Heron." He froze again, slightly distorted. "This is Sheriff Heron." The third time, the voice changed. Deeper. Now, slower. "She shouldn't have answered." He slammed the receiver down, but as he did, another phone began to ring, this time from outside the house. He turned toward the window. Across the street, the Kesslers' phone was ringing. 2. And then the Moore house, and then the Ellison place. All of them, every disconnected landline on Maple Drive, began to ring in perfect unison. The noise was deafening, a chorus of tones, echoing through the mist. Harlan stumbled back out onto the road, shining his flashlight wildly from house to house. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the ringing stopped. Total silence. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then his radio crackled. "Sheriff, it's Rosa. We're getting reports. Power surges all across Maple Drive." He brought the radio to his lips. "I'm on scene." The phones, they're active again. Before he could say more, the static grew louder, and then faintly Rosa's voice twisted into something else. "Don't go downstairs." His blood ran cold. That was the same warning Sarah had received. "Rosa," he shouted. "Say that again." But the line went dead. He jumped into his truck and sped toward the Kessler house. When he arrived, the front door was open. Inside, the lights flickered erratically, and every phone, landline, cordless, even an old cell on the counter was vibrating, screens flashing. The same message. "Incoming call unknown." He approached one, pressed answer, static. Then Sarah's voice sobbing. "He's in the house." "Sarah, where are you?" "Basement." Harlan grabbed his flashlight and ran to the basement door. It stood ajar, just like before. He shouted her name again, but the only answer was a faint tapping, like fingernails against the concrete below. He took the first step down, then the second. The air grew colder. The tapping stopped. He swept the flashlight across the floor. Empty. No, Sarah. Then the beam caught something glinting in the corner. Her phone. Screen frozen on a text message draft that read, "It's my voice again. By morning, Sarah Kessler was gone." The deputies searched the entire property. Nothing. No forced entry, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Just the phone in the basement, still plugged into the wall, emitting a low hum like a held breath. When Harlan picked it up, he heard faint whispering, dozens of overlapping voices, all speaking at once. He couldn't make out the words, but one phrase repeated again and again. Beneath the noise. Answer the call. He dropped the receiver, stepping back. For the first time in his career, Sheriff Mark Harlan felt genuine fear, not of what he didn't understand, but of what he might already believe, because the
truth was starting to look less like a
crime and more like an invitation.
That
evening, Rosa reviewed the recordings from the dispatcher system. At exactly 11:59 p.m. A strange tone appeared on the radio frequency, like the faint ring of a rotary dial spinning. She ran the waveform through software. There was something encoded in it, an audio imprint, barely audible, but structured, like a voice. When she isolated the sound and played it slowed down, the voice became clear enough to make out the words. It was saying the same thing Harlan had heard. She shouldn't have answered. At 12:17 a.m., another report
came in.
A man named Peter Lang, who lived at the far end of Maple Drive, called 911 in panic, claiming someone was outside his window. The line cut halfway through his call. When officers arrived, the house was empty.
Lunch.
Phone was found lying beside his bed.
On
the caller ID, incoming call from Peter
Lang.
Sheriff Harlan stared at the board the next morning.
5 disappearances now.
Nobodies. No footprints, just phones ringing where they shouldn't. Rosa entered quietly. Sir, the company pulled the records you asked for. The trunk line feeding Maple Drive was rerouted years ago through an old switching facility, abandoned 15 miles
north.
What's there now? Nothing.
It's
condemned, but there's still power feeding into it. Harlan grabbed his coat. Then that's where we start.
He
paused at the door, glancing back at the wall map one last time. The pins marking each missing resident formed a crooked line, each address perfectly aligned with the path of the old phone cable running beneath the street. He drew a straight edge across them, following the route toward the north edge of town.
At
the end of the line sat one final red mark, the switching station. Beneath it, someone had scrolled a note years earlier when the system was decommissioned. Line disconnected.
Do
not reactivate. The road to the old pine hollow switching station wounded through miles of dying pines and open fields, littered with rusted telephone poles. Most of the lines had been cut years ago, their wires hanging loose like veins from a forgotten body. Sheriff Mark Harlan and Deputy Rosa Vance drove in silence, the tires crunching over
gravel.
It was early evening and the sky glowed orange through the trees. According to the records, the switching station had been decommissioned in 2004 after a small electrical fire.
Since
then had been fenced off, condemned, and completely removed from the network
grid.
But somehow phone traffic from Maple Drive was still being routed through it. When the building finally came into view, Harlan slowed the truck. The place looked like something torn out of time. A squat concrete structure with boarded-up windows and a single rusted door surrounded by overgrown weeds. The faded letters Pine Hollow Exchange 9B were barely visible above the doorway. Creepy, doesn't even cover it, Rosa muttered. Harlan killed the engine. Keep the recorder running. She clipped her body cam on. The small red light blinked to life. The front door was padlocked, but the metal was so corroded it snapped with a single pull. The smell hit them first. Damp earth, burned wiring, and the faint sting of ozone. Inside, the air was heavy with
dust.
Rows of defunct switchboards lined the walls, tangled with cables that slithered across the floor like roots. Broken monitors flickered weakly, though There was no generator running. Hows? Their power? Rosa asked, shining her flashlight toward the far wall.
Good.
Question. They moved deeper in.
The
light from their beams bounced off metal. Racks filled with old reels of magnetic tape, each labeled with handwritten numbers. Rosa leaned closer to one.
These are call logs.
The reels were dated from 1996 through 2003. She ran her gloved finger across the top of a reel marked Maple 37. That's Maple
Drive.
Harland frowned. They recorded calls out here. Looks like it. Maybe for maintenance or archiving. Then she noticed something odd. One tape among them was new. The plastic casing was clean, untouched by dust. The label read, simply, October 3rd, 17 active line. The date of the first call.
Rosa's lead.
The reel onto the old player console. When she powered it on, the machine groaned but came to life. The reels began to turn, and through the static came a faint looping sound. Brying. It was the sound of a phone. The same hollow mechanical ring they'd heard before. Then a voice, Sarah Kessler's. Hello, Harlan stiffened. Another voice echoed back, low and distorted, almost identical. Don't go downstairs.
The
real hiss, then went quiet.
Rosa.
Swallowed. It's her call. The machine
clicked.
A new segment began. Evelyn. Moore's voice this time. Who's this? He's in the house. Then the same click. Same silence. Harlan reached for the pause switch, his hand trembling
slightly.
How did this get here?
These
calls weren't supposed to route anywhere. Rosa checked the tapes and label. It says active feed. That means the system's still recording.
But to
where? She glanced at the patch cables running into the wall. Only one way to find out. They followed the bundle of cables through a narrow maintenance corridor. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Their flashlights revealed old maintenance notes written in chalk, lines of numbers and brief messages like line dead or no tone. Return. At the corridor's end stood a metal door with no handle, only a slot, where one might have been carved roughly into the surface were the words, "Do not connect." Harlan exhaled. That's reassuring. He pried the door open with his crowbar. Behind it lay a small chamber filled with equipment far more modern than the rest of the facility. Sleek servers humming faintly. Their indicator lights blinking in a slow rhythm. The wires from the old switchboards fed directly into this new rack. Rosa crouched down, scanning the labels. These were installed recently, within the last 5 years, maybe. By who? No record of an upgrade. She said, someone's been maintaining this in secret. She tapped a small display panel. It lit up with a digital prompt. Active line connection 6. Route Maple. Drive primary. Next activation 11:59 p.m. They both stared at the screen. 6. Active lines, Rosa murmured. But there are only 5 houses. Harlan frowned. So, who's the 6th? They searched the racks until Rosa found a small hard drive labeled audio log 11 to 59 feet. She slotted it into her portable reader. At first, just static, then faint voices. Shouldn't have answered. He's not done yet. Don't go downstairs. Whispering hundreds of them. Men, women, children, all layered together in a wave of distortion. Rosa covered her mouth. Dear God. Harlan turned off the reader, his jaw tight. Pack it up. We'll analyze it at the station. They started toward the exit, but the lights suddenly flickered. Every server fan spun faster, humming like a hive. On the screen, new text appeared. Incoming call. 6th line. active. A phone began to ring. Not one of the old analog ones. This was louder, sharper, coming from somewhere deeper in the room. Rosa followed the sound, pushing aside a panel of hanging cables, until she saw it. A single black rotary phone mounted to the concrete wall, gleaming like it had been polished that morning. It had no dust, no cord leading
to the rest of the system.
It was just and it was ringing. Harlan's throat went dry. Don't, he said quietly as Rosa stepped closer. The phone rang again. She stopped inches from it, staring.
You hear that?
He nodded. It's faint. Underneath it, a voice. Harlan strained to listen. Beneath the bell tone was a faint whisper repeating in rhythm with each ring. Pick up, Rosa, he said firmly. Step away. But curiosity or something stronger had already taken hold. She reached out and lifted the receiver. The ringing stopped.
For a
moment's silence. Then a sound like breathing filled the room.
Hello, Rosa, said softly. The pause.
Then her own voice came back, distorted and delayed. Hello.
Rosa Froze.
It's me. Then another whisper joined it. Male, distant almost. Crawling through the speaker.
She
answered. The lights dimmed. The server fan screamed. Rosa dropped the receiver. But it didn't fall. It hung midair, suspended by its cord like an invisible hand still held it to the wall.
Rosa,
Harlan shouted, grabbing her arm.
Let's move.
They bolted toward the exit.
The
sound of phones ringing now all around them. Every console, every switchboard, all alive, all vibrating.
Outside, they
stumbled into the night air, gasping. The building behind them pulsed with flickering light through the cracks. Then, one by one, the phones went silent. They stood there trying to catch their
breath.
You okay? Harlan asked. Rosen nodded shakily. Yeah, I think so.
He
glanced back at the structure. We're not coming back here alone again.
She
managed a weak laugh.
Deal. Back at the
station, the audio drive they'd taken refused to copy. Every attempt to open the file caused the computer to crash. But before it shut down, one folder appeared briefly on screen.
It was
labeled Maple Drive Recordings Live. Rosa stared at the timestamp. It's still logging at this moment.
Yeah, it's
recording right now. Heron unplugged the
drive.
Lock it up. Nobody touches it until we bring in a state tech team.
But
that night, when everyone had gone home, he couldn't stop thinking about the sixth line. He opened the call map. Again, the 5 known houses each had their routing codes. The 6th line's coordinates, however, pointed to a location that made no sense.
Smack in
the middle of the forest behind Maple
Drive.
No house, no structure, just
trees.
The next morning, Heron and Rosa hiked into the woods, following the GPS coordinates. The forest was quiet except for the crunch of leaves underfoot. After a half-mile, they found it.
A
single telephone pole, ancient and splintered, still standing among the
trees.
Its wire led straight into the ground, freshly dug, the soil disturbed. At its base was a small wooden box, like a junction hub, partially buried. Harlan knelt, brushing away dirt. This looks recent. Rosa squatted beside him. Someone extended the 6th line out. Here.
Why?
She didn't answer. Then the faint sound of a dial tone drifted up from the ground. They both froze.
He
pressed his ear closer. The tone was real, steady, strong, coming from beneath the soil.
Rosa whispered.
There's a phone down there. They dug quickly with their hands until the outline of a black rotary phone emerged, half buried, its receiver resting on the
dirt.
Heron picked it up carefully.
The
tone continued. Then, without warning, the phone began to ring. Both of them jumped back. The ringing was muffled but clear, echoing through the hollow
Ground.
Sheriff, Rosa said slowly.
I
think it's calling us.
They didn't answer.
They sealed the area and left, immediately marking it for evidence collection. But that night, back at home, Harlan's personal phone rang. His private landline, one unlisted one. He barely used. He hesitated before picking up. Hair in static. Then Rosa's voice came through. Sheriff, he's in the
house.
He bolted upright. Rosa, where are you? No response. Only the faint sound of ringing coming from somewhere behind her.
Words.
He grabbed his coat and rushed to her address. When he arrived, her front door was open, her lights flickering. Inside, her body cam lay on the floor, still recording.
The
footage showed her sitting at her desk, listening to the phone ring. Then she picked it up and froze. Her eyes widened. Her lips moved soundlessly as if she were hearing something terrible. Finally, she whispered, "It's my voice." The camera toppled to the ground, and the frame filled with darkness. But faintly, through the microphone, a man's voice whispered the same words Harlan had come
to dread.
She shouldn't have answered. By the time Detective Sarah Lang reached the Pine Hollow Municipal Archives, the morning sun was barely filtering through the thick fog that seemed to sit over the town like a shroud. The building itself, a squat red brick structure left over from the 1950s, smelled faintly of mildew and old paper. The archivist, a frail man named Mr. Carter, was already waiting for her with a pot of coffee and a small mountain of boxes marked telephone records, Pine Hollow Exchange. Everything before 1987 is in microfilm, Carter said, rubbing his rheumatic hands
together.
You're looking for line 6, right? The one connected to the Miller
property.
Sarah nodded. That's the one. It's been disconnected since 1998, according to the phone company.
He gave
a soft chuckle that didn't sound amused. That line's been disconnected more times than I can count. Always seems to turn back up. Last time I heard, the new owners of the old Miller house complained that their phone rang at 2 o'clock a.m. every night for a week. No number on the caller ID. They had it cut, but he trailed off, shrugging. You can't cut what's already dead. Sarah frowned. What do you mean by that? Carter gestured toward the shelves. We'll see.
That
line's history is tangled. 2 hours later, Sarah's desk was buried in yellowed paper. The records were meticulous. Switching logs, service tickets, billing ledgers. Most of it was mundane, but then she found a pattern. Line 6, registered originally to A. Howard and Claire Miller, 1226 Birch Hollow Road, had logged maintenance calls every few years, each marked phantom activation. The earliest entry was from 1964. The complaint read, customer reports, receiving calls from disconnected extension. Line emits whispering static.
No di alton.
Then another in 1973. Phone rings from inside the house. Technician finds no secondary handset. And another in 1981. Complaint of ringing from wall outlet line. Unconnected at junction. Sarah's pen
stopped moving.
There was again, just like the victims this year, phones ringing that weren't supposed to exist. She flipped to the final note dated May 12, 1998. The last known record before the Millers sold the home. Customer reports a call from their own number. Line emits residual voice patterns. Advised full disconnect. Residual voice patterns. That phrase made her skin
crawl.
That evening she drove out to the Pine Hollow telephone switching station. The place sat on the edge of town, half swallowed by the encroaching
woods.
It had once been manned by a dozen operators, but now it was little more than a forgotten bunker, dust, metal, and silence. The door creaked as she pushed it open. The air inside was stale, filled with the faint scent of copper and old oil. Rows of mechanical switches and patch panels stretched before her like the rib cage of some long-dead beast. She turned on her flashlight. The beam swept across an array of numbered terminals. Line 1, Line 3, until it landed on the far corner. Line 6. The wire feeding into it had been severed cleanly, the metal ends capped with yellow tape.
But
someone had scratched something into the metal housing below it,
crude and
shallow as though done with a knife. Sarah leaned closer and squinted. Still connected, her heart gave a hard thud. The beam of her flashlight jittered slightly as she followed the conduit cable down into the floor.
grating.
The line was dead, or at least it should have been, but she could hear it faintly. A low, almost imperceptible hum. It wasn't the electric buzz of an active wire. It was rhythmic, almost like breathing. Sarah crouched down and pressed her ear close to the metal plate. For a moment there was nothing. Then, in the silence between her own breaths, she heard it. A whisper. Not words, not quite, but a shape of sound. A faint, breathy murmur like someone trying to speak through water.
She
jerked back, slamming the flashlight against the wall. The noise stopped. The hum went flat.
Her phone rang. The sound
was so loud in the empty space that she nearly dropped it. She fumbled it from her pocket, hands shaking. The screen showed unknown caller, but the number beneath it made her blood run cold. 701556606. Line 6. She pressed answer before she could stop herself.
hello.
Static, and then her own voice, distant and warped. Sarah, you shouldn't have come here.
The
phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the floor. The call ended instantly. When she picked it up again, the number was gone from the log.
Back
at her motel that night, Sarah poured herself 2 fingers of whiskey and stared at the phone on the bedside table, as though it might start breathing. She'd seen strange things in her career, but this was different. This was personal. The call had used her own
voice.
Not a mimic, not close, but
exact.
The pitch, the tone, the rhythm of her speech. She replayed the events. In her mind, the whispering hum in the floor, the knife-scratched message, the archivist's words. You can't cut what's already dead. She opened her laptop and started searching through obituaries, cross-referencing the Miller family. Within minutes, she found it.
Claire
Miller died 1998. Her husband, Howard, missing, presumed dead the same year. Their only child, Anna Miller, had been 13 when her parents disappeared.
There
were rumors of a fight of voices heard over the phone line the night before. They vanished. Sarah dug deeper, scrolling through scanned police reports, until she hit something that made her stop cold. Case number 98 to 1624. Pine Hollow PD caller Anna Miller.
My parents are gone.
The phone won't stop ringing. It's them. It's their voices. The responding officer had found no sign of struggle, just 2 untouched dinner plates and a phone lying off the hook, still humming faintly when he arrived. The case had gone cold. The next morning, Sarah drove out to 1226 Birch Hollow Road. The house stood alone at the end of a narrow lane, its paint peeled by decades of weather.
The
windows were blank, the front yard swallowed by ivy. The real estate records showed it hadn't been occupied in years. The last buyer, a man named Greg Thorne had moved out after only 3 months. He'd left no forwarding address. Sarah climbed the creaking steps and tried the door. Locked, but the key she'd gotten from the county clerk. Turned it easily. The smell hit her. First, old dust and wood rot. The air was thick, unmoving. She stepped inside and flicked on her flashlight. The living room was exactly as it must have been decades ago. Faded wallpaper, a single armchair, a rotary phone sitting on a lace-covered table by the window. The phone cord dangled loosely, disconnected from the wall. But as she crossed the room, she noticed something. Oh, the line didn't just stop. It trailed through the wall, vanishing into a thin, jagged crack that ran straight down to the floorboards. Sarah knelt, tracing the line with her fingers. It was warm. Then the phone rang. She froze. The sound wasn't coming from the phone in front of her, but from somewhere beneath the floor, muffled, persistent. Bring her flashlight. Beam danced as she looked for a trap, door or crawl space. In the far corner, half covered by an old rug, she found a small square cutout. She dragged it open, revealing a narrow set of wooden steps descending into darkness. The ringing grew louder. She hesitated, then descended. The basement was shallow, more than 7 feet high. The concrete walls, slick with condensation. In the center sat an ancient switchboard, manual-like, the kind used before automation. 6 plugs, 6 cords. 5 were dusty, untouched. The 6th was glowing faintly. Red. The ringing stopped. Sarah stepped closer. The label above the 6th line was handwritten Miller Residence. She reached out and touched the plug. It was warm to the touch, vibrating slightly. When she leaned closer, she could hear it again, the faint breathing hum. And beneath it, layered in the static, came a voice. You connected the line, Sarah. Now we can hear you. Her flashlight flickered. Then the phone upstairs began ringing again. Bring. She spun, heart hammering, but there was no one else in the room. Only the glowing switchboard and the echo of her own shallow breaths. The basement light snapped off. In total darkness, the phone above rang once more, then went silent. When she finally stumbled outside minutes later, gasping, she found her car door ajar and the driver's seat empty, except for a folded scrap of paper on the dashboard. It read, in neat handwriting, line 6 was never for them. It's for you. And beneath it, scrolled in what looked like fresh ink, 701556606, the same number from before. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. One new voicemail. The screen showed no missed calls. She pressed play. Static, then her own voice. Again. Next time you answer, we'll tell you what happened in the basement. Sarah's hand trembled as she stared at the empty road ahead. The woods, whispering softly in the wind. Somewhere out there, a line that should have been dead decades ago was breathing again, and it wanted her to listen. The next morning, Detective Sarah Lang sat in her car, parked at the edge of the pine hollow woods, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles blanched white. The voicemail from last night replayed again and again in her head. Next time you answer, we'll tell you what happened in the basement. Her own voice, her exact tone and cadence, echoed through her mind like a taunt. She'd heard of elaborate prank calls, voiced since AI mimics. But this wasn't that. The technology wasn't the issue. It was the impossibility. The call had come from a number that didn't exist anymore, connected to a line that had been physically severed. And somehow she knew it wasn't over. A knock on her window made her jump. It was Deputy Mark Keller, his face pale from lack of sleep. He held a manila folder under one arm and a cup of coffee in the other. "You look like hell, Sarah," he said, softly. "Feel worse," she muttered, lowering the window. "Tell me you found
something."
He slid the folder through the gap. "You're not going to like it." Inside were a series of old photos, grainy black and whites, showing the inside of the Pine Hollow switching station back when it was operational in the 1960s. Sarah flipped through them, absently, rows of women in headsets, plugging cables, smiling for the camera, until one photo made her freeze. In the back corner of the room, half obscured by shadow, stood a man. His face was turned slightly, but enough of it was visible to make her pulse spike. The name scrolled at the bottom read, Supervisor Miller. Howard Miller, Anna's
father. He worked for the phone company.
Sarah whispered. Keller nodded.
30 years.
Maintenance, switching systems, line oversight. He had access to everything. Every line in Pine Hollow. Sarah felt the chill roll down her spine, including his own. Yeah, Keller
said.
And that's not all. He produced a second document, an old disciplinary